The day his marriage ended did not come with shouting or broken plates. It came quietly, like a door closing in another room. He stood in the small living room of the apartment, holding his child's school bag while his ex-wife packed the last of her things. She did not look angry. She looked tired and certain, as if the decision had been made long before that day. She told him she wanted more from life, more comfort, more excitement, more security. She said he was a good man, but not enough for her anymore. Her words were calm, but they landed heavy. When she left, she did not look back. From that day on, he became a single father. The apartment felt larger and emptier at the same time. He moved the child's bed closer to his own room so he could hear every sound at night. Mornings started earlier. He woke before sunrise to prepare breakfast, pack lunch, and make sure homework was done. He learned how to braid hair, how to calm tears before school, and how to smile even when his body felt exhausted. Money became tight very quickly. He worked a regular job that paid just enough to survive. Some weeks, he had to choose between fixing something in the house or buying new clothes for his child. He always chose his child. He wore the same shoes until the soles became thin. He never complained. His ex-wife stayed in touch, but not in a kind way. She called when she needed something or wanted to remind him of what she believed he lacked. Sometimes she laughed lightly and said things like, "You're wasting your life?" or "No one will want a man with so much responsibility." Once, during an argument about school fees, she said, "Be honest. Who would love you now?" Those words stayed with him longer than he wanted to admit. He did not respond with anger. He simply said goodbye and returned to his routine. He believed arguing would only hurt his child in the long run. So he stayed quiet. He focused on being present. Evenings were the hardest. After dinner, when the dishes were washed and the lights were dim, he sat beside his child and listened to stories about school. He nodded, asked questions, and laughed at small jokes. Only after his child fell asleep did the weight of the day settle in. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, wondering how life had changed so fast. Loneliness was not loud. It was soft and constant. It followed him while he waited for the bus, while he stood in line at the grocery store, and while he folded small clothes late at night. Friends slowly stopped calling. Some felt uncomfortable. Others assumed he was too busy. In a way, they were right. He did not date. Not because he didn't want companionship, but because he didn't feel ready. His child had already experienced one big change. He refused to bring confusion into their life. Love, he believed, should feel safe, not rushed out at school events. He noticed how different his life looked from others. Most parents arrived as couples. Some mothers gave him polite smiles filled with curiosity. Others avoided conversation. A few whispered. He kept his head down and stayed focused on his child's performance, clapping the loudest every time. One afternoon, while waiting outside the school gate, he overheard a group talking about weekend trips and new cars. He felt invisible. He did not envy them. He simply felt distant from a life he once imagined for himself. His ex-wife seemed to move on quickly. She posted photos online, smiling in places he could not afford to visit. Once, when they met to discuss their child, she looked at him and said, "I hope you're not expecting life to suddenly get better." Her tone was almost kind, but the message was clear. He went home that day and cooked dinner like always. He helped with homework. He listened. He tucked his child into bed. Then he sat alone in the kitchen and allowed himself a few quiet minutes. He did not cry loudly. He simply breathed and reminded himself that tomorrow still needed him. What people did not see was the strength growing inside him. Each day he chose patience over pride. Each night he chose responsibility over escape. He learned how to solve problems on his own. He learned how to sit with discomfort without letting it harden his heart. On weekends, he took his child to the park, even when he was tired. They shared simple meals and talked about dreams. His child once asked, "Are you sad?" He paused, then smiled and said, "Sometimes. But I'm okay." And he meant it. There were moments when doubt crept in, when he wondered if his ex-wife was right, if maybe this was all life had planned for him. But every time his child laughed, every time small arms wrapped around his neck, he felt grounded again. He did not know it yet, but this quiet season was shaping him. Not for revenge, not for proof, but for something real, something steady, something built on respect, not appearances. For now, he was just a single dad, doing his best, ignored by many, judged by some, and underestimated by almost everyone. He did not chase validation. He did not defend his worth with words. He simply showed up every day. And that was how part one of his story lived. Not with drama, not with victory, but with quiet endurance. The kind that no one notices until it changes everything. Life for the single dad settled into a rhythm that was both exhausting and comforting. Days began early and ended late, filled with the usual responsibilities. But slowly, he started noticing small moments of peace. It came in a laugh from his child, over a simple joke or a quiet walk in the park when the world seemed still. He learned to find joy in these tiny victories, even when everything else felt uncertain. One morning, while waiting for the bus to work, he saw a woman standing nearby with a book in her hands. She smiled at him briefly, and he returned the gesture, though politely. Over the following weeks, they began exchanging small greetings. She asked how his child was doing and commented on the weather, but it was more than that. There was warmth in her tone, an ease that made him feel noticed without being judged. Their encounters became more frequent. She was calm, quiet, and observant, never flaunting anything about her life. For the first time, he felt someone paying attention not to his struggles, but to his choices, his patience, and his heart. She never asked about money or status. She never commented on his ex-wife. She simply acknowledged his efforts and appreciated his dedication. He discovered she was genuinely interested in his life, in his child, and in the way he carried himself. They would talk about simple things, the best breakfast spots in town, a funny incident at school, or the book she was reading. There was no pressure, no rush, no hidden intentions. Just quiet conversations that slowly built trust. At first, he felt hesitant. He had been hurt and was cautious about letting anyone in. He reminded himself of the fragile balance he maintained every day. Introducing someone new into their lives could bring joy, but could also bring confusion. Still, he found himself looking forward to her presence, her calm voice, and the way she seemed to understand without needing explanations. She began joining them on small outings. They went to the library, the park, and sometimes to the local market. She would help carry the groceries, listen to his child's chatter, and laugh at the small things. The child began to trust her, asking questions and sharing little secrets. The single dad noticed how naturally she fit into their life without trying to take over, without making demands. She became a part of their small world through patience, care, and understanding. As the weeks turned into months, the bond grew. She admired how he never spoke badly about his ex-wife, even when the memories of her words hurt. She noticed his quiet resilience, the way he handled responsibilities with patience, and the way he found joy in his child's laughter, despite the exhaustion. In her eyes, he was not defined by what he lacked, but by what he gave freely every day. At work, he remained diligent, but he started seeing the world differently. He realized that support came in forms other than financial or visible. Sometimes it was simply someone believing in you, seeing your value, and showing up. Her presence reminded him that not everyone judged him for his past or his circumstances. There was space for kindness, space for connection, space for love without conditions. He began to notice his own growth. His patience deepened, his outlook softened, and his capacity for joy increased. Simple things became precious: a shared meal, a quiet laugh, an afternoon at the park. He began to hope again, quietly, cautiously, without the loud excitement of expectation, but with a steady, growing feeling that life could offer more than mere survival. Their friendship became a cornerstone of his new life. She never pushed for more than he was ready to give, never imposed rules, never rushed the pace. She simply walked beside him, offering support without intrusion. He learned that true support was not about solving every problem, but about being present, about being someone who witnessed life without judgment. One evening, while helping his child with a school project, she stopped by unexpectedly. She knelt beside them, helping cut and glue pieces together. She praised their efforts, laughed when mistakes were made, and celebrated small successes. She didn't just join in the activity. She made it a moment of joy and encouragement. That evening, the single dad realized how rare and valuable it was to find someone who could enter their life without altering its core. Someone who complimented rather than complicated. She never spoke about her wealth or status. In fact, she lived simply, as though the world around them was ordinary, even though he could sense something unusual about her confidence and ease. It wasn't arrogance. It was quiet assurance, a comfort that reminded him that the world could be generous in ways that had nothing to do with money. He started to notice small changes in himself. He was more patient, more reflective, more open to trusting others. He realized that even in the midst of exhaustion, joy could be found. Even in moments of doubt, hope could persist. He saw that support didn't always have to be visible. Sometimes it was quiet and consistent, the kind that gave strength without taking attention. The single dad began allowing himself to enjoy small freedoms. An afternoon without chores became a picnic at the park. A rainy evening was transformed into a storytelling night. She never dictated how these moments unfolded. She simply participated and encouraged, showing that life could still hold magic even amidst challenges. He noticed that his child responded positively to her presence. They asked for her company, shared stories, and sought her advice. The single dad was careful not to impose expectations, but allowed the relationship to grow naturally. He saw how much easier life became when support was offered not as a handout, but as companionship and understanding. Slowly, he began thinking about the future again, not in terms of wealth or recognition, but in terms of stability, happiness, and companionship. He realized that trust could be rebuilt, that connection could be formed, and that love did not have to arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it arrived quietly, patiently, and unexpectedly. Despite this growing bond, he remained cautious. He did not want to rush, and he did not want his child to feel displaced. He remembered the words of his ex-wife and the laughter of those who had doubted him. Yet he realized that life was moving forward, and the past did not have to dictate the present. He could embrace support without fearing judgment. The days continued in their steady rhythm, but now there was a lightness, a sense that he was not entirely alone. He had found someone who saw his efforts, acknowledged his challenges, and offered quiet companionship. He realized that life, even when unpredictable, could provide moments of unexpected grace. Evenings became richer. After homework and dinner, they would sit together, sharing stories or planning small weekend activities. Her presence was comforting, not disruptive. It was a quiet support that allowed him to relax without guilt. A reminder that resilience was not about enduring alone, but about knowing someone was walking beside you. One rainy afternoon, she stayed longer than usual. They made hot chocolate and watched the rain fall outside. The single dad noticed how calm he felt with her there. The laughter of his child, the warmth of the room, and the simple presence of someone who cared created a sense of home he hadn't felt in years. He realized that life could be rebuilt in small, consistent steps, and that happiness could exist in the ordinary. God, as weeks turned into months, he began to trust the rhythm of their connection. There was no rush, no pressure, only steady companionship. He noticed that when challenges arose, she was present without judgment. She offered ideas, suggestions, and encouragement, but never demanded. This quiet support strengthened him more than anything else. Through this, he learned an important lesson. Strength was not only in enduring hardship, but also in allowing support to exist. He had spent so long proving himself, showing resilience, that he almost forgot that life could be shared. He realized that the kind of support that mattered most was subtle, consistent, and grounded in respect. This period became a defining chapter in his life. The quiet strength he found in himself and the unexpected support of someone who valued him without conditions began to reshape his understanding of love and companionship. He began to see that life could be richer than survival, and that connection could offer healing in ways he had not imagined. Part 2 of his journey was not about triumph or dramatic change. It was about noticing the small gifts life offered, about building trust and companionship, and about learning that quiet support could lead to strength that was steady and enduring. It was about understanding that even amidst responsibilities, exhaustion, and past hurt, life had room for kindness, understanding, and unexpected relationships. Time passed, and the bond between the single dad and the woman grew slowly, naturally, and without force. There were no grand gestures, no rushed declarations, just small moments that carried great meaning. They spent afternoons at the park, mornings helping with homework, and evenings sharing stories over a simple dinner. Each interaction built trust, patience, and understanding, forming a foundation stronger than either of them expected. He began to notice things he had long forgotten to see in others: patience, quiet kindness, and the ability to listen without judgment. She never offered advice unless it was asked, and even then, it was gentle and considered. She watched his child with care, never intruding, never trying to replace a parent, simply being present. It was the first time he had seen a person offer support without expectation, without judgment, and it opened a new way of thinking about relationships. They laughed together at small mistakes. The child would spill paint or knock over toys, and she would smile, helping to clean up. She celebrated accomplishments, no matter how minor. Through her actions, she showed that love and respect could coexist without drama or pressure. He realized he had been so focused on proving himself to the world, to his ex-wife, and to others, that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to be genuinely appreciated. There were quiet moments, too. He noticed the way she sat silently, reading while the child played, or how she would hum a tune while preparing a simple snack. Those moments felt like gentle reassurance that life could be calm, even when it was difficult. For the first time in years, he felt safe to be himself, without pretense or performance. He reflected on the past and realized how much he had grown. The bitterness toward his ex-wife, though still a shadow at times, no longer controlled him. Her mocking words had lost their sting, replaced by a quiet confidence in his own ability to provide love, stability, and care. He understood now that true worth came from actions, not recognition, from consistency, not applause. As the weeks turned into months, he saw that their relationship was deeper than companionship. It was based on respect, trust, and shared understanding. She never demanded anything from him, and he never felt the need to impress her. Their connection was genuine, built on the reality of life rather than illusions or material expectations. One afternoon, As they worked on a craft project with his child, he realized how natural it had become to include her in daily life. She laughed at the child's jokes, offered gentle guidance, and quietly stepped back when space was needed. He noticed how effortlessly she fit into the rhythms of their lives without ever taking control. It was a rare quality that made him respect her even more. He began to trust her judgment, her instincts, and her presence. She became someone whose opinion mattered, not because she had power or status, but because she understood him, his child, and the life they had built together. Their relationship was a quiet partnership, based on shared values and mutual respect. Despite the closeness, he never felt pressured. There was no rush to define their relationship. There was only an understanding that life was moving forward together, slowly and steadily. They shared worries, celebrated successes, and supported each other through small challenges. This steady companionship provided him with a sense of balance and reassurance he had not felt since the divorce. He began to notice subtle changes in himself. He became more patient, more reflective, and more willing to let others into his life. He realized that love was not about grand gestures, but about consistency, understanding, and shared responsibility. The quiet moments, the simple acts of kindness, and the genuine support became the pillars of his happiness. One evening, while tucking his child into bed, he noticed how naturally the child spoke about her. There was no confusion or discomfort, only warmth and trust. He realized that the presence of someone who genuinely cared could create a sense of security that words alone could not convey. It was a revelation that strengthened his resolve to nurture this relationship carefully and patiently. Over time, he began to see that the woman was more than just a friend or companion. She was a partner in the truest sense, someone who respected his past, valued his present, and offered quiet encouragement for the future. Their bond was not built on drama or circumstance, but on respect, understanding, and shared experiences. He began to reflect on his ex-wife's mocking words, the laughter of those who doubted him, and the challenges he had faced as a single father. None of it seemed as significant anymore. The quiet respect and trust he had found were more valuable than any validation from the outside world. He understood now that life's true rewards often came in subtle, unassuming forms. Their relationship also taught him the value of patience. He had learned to wait, to observe, and to allow connections to develop naturally. He realized that rushing or forcing relationships often led to disappointment, but allowing time, space, and understanding created a foundation that could withstand challenges. One afternoon, as they walked through the park, he noticed how the light fell on her face, how calm and confident she seemed. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for her presence, for the way she had quietly become a part of their lives. It was not about wealth, status, or appearances. It was about trust, respect, and shared understanding. It was about finding someone who could walk beside him without judgment or expectation. He began to share more of himself, not just as a father, but as a man with hopes, fears, and dreams. She listened without interruption, offered gentle encouragement, and never pushed him to change or conform. It was the first time in years that he felt truly seen and understood. As months turned into a year, their connection deepened. They celebrated small victories together, shared challenges, and supported each other quietly. He noticed how much stronger he had become, not because of what he had endured, but because of the trust, respect, and quiet companionship he had found. He realized that life could offer love and support in ways that were subtle and unassuming. He had spent so long chasing validation and recognition, only to discover that true value lay in quiet, consistent, and genuine relationships. He understood now that respect and understanding were the foundations of lasting connection. Through this, he also saw the impact on his child. The child felt safe, loved, and understood. The presence of someone who offered support without expectation created a sense of security that was invaluable. He realized that his child's happiness and sense of stability were as important as his own. He began to imagine a future where life was not defined by past failures, mockery, or hardship, but by the quiet strength, trust, and companionship that had entered his life. He understood that love could arrive slowly, patiently, and unexpectedly, and that it did not require grand gestures or dramatic declarations to be real and meaningful. He had learned to appreciate the ordinary moments, the shared laughter, the quiet support, and the simple joys that came from being present and caring. He understood that these moments were the true markers of a life well lived. Far more than wealth, recognition, or status. In part 3 of his journey, he discovered the depth of human connection built on respect, trust, and understanding. He realized that love and companionship did not need to be flashy or fast. They needed to be steady, genuine, and grounded in shared values and experiences. This bond, quietly nurtured over time, became the cornerstone of a life that promised stability, hope, and the possibility of happiness. He finally understood that being seen, respected, and trusted was more powerful than any validation from the world. He knew now that the quiet strength and support he had found were shaping not just his life, but the life of his child as well. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but he felt ready to face it, knowing he was no longer alone, and that he had discovered a bond that could endure. Quietly, steadily, and meaningfully, months passed, and life had grown steady, even comforting. For the single dad and his child, the woman had become a quiet part of their daily routine. She shared in homework, meals, and small celebrations, always careful not to impose, but to support. He trusted her now completely, more than he had ever trusted anyone since the divorce. Yet, he did not know everything about her. There were still pieces of her life she kept private, pieces that he had not questioned, because he was happy simply to have her in their world. One evening, she suggested going to a charity event. Something simple, she said, and he agreed, thinking it would be a good experience for his child. The event was held in a grand hall, full of people in fine clothing, sparkling lights, and soft music. He noticed her moving easily among the crowd, greeting people with warmth and familiarity. He felt a little out of place in his simple suit and quiet manner, but he reminded himself that he was there with someone he trusted. As the evening went on, someone approached him and whispered something in his ear. He froze. The words made his stomach tighten. "Do you know who she really is?" they asked. He shook his head. They explained that she was not just an ordinary woman, but a billionaire. She had businesses, wealth, and influence far beyond what he could imagine. His heart raced. He felt a mixture of shock, disbelief, and fear. Was this why she had entered their lives so gently? Was it because she could give them security, material comforts, a lifestyle far beyond their needs? He excused himself and found a quiet corner, his mind spinning. The life he had imagined with her had always been simple, warm, and steady. But now, a new layer of reality pressed down. He worried about how this wealth might change things, how it might change her view of him, or the way others would see him. His mind drifted back to his ex-wife's mocking words. "No one will love you." She would be shocked, of course. He felt a small flicker of quiet satisfaction, but it was quickly replaced by a heavier concern. How would he navigate this new reality? When he finally confronted her, he found her calm, as always. She explained that she had chosen to reveal this part of her life only when it became relevant. Her feelings for him were not based on wealth or status. She admired his patience, his integrity, and the love he gave his child. The money, she said, had nothing to do with why she spent time with them. He listened slowly, trying to absorb the words. They were true. He could feel it in the way she looked at him, the way she spoke, the sincerity that had never wavered. The revelation did not come without fear. He worried that the dynamics would shift, that the bond they had built might be affected by outside opinions or by the expectations that came with her world. But as the evening continued, he saw her interact with the child. There was no change in how she treated them, no alteration in warmth or kindness. She was still the same person who had quietly entered their lives and become a source of support and stability. The days after the event were quiet, but full of reflection. He thought about the past, the struggles, the lonely nights, and the laughter that had gradually returned to their home. He realized that his respect and love for her were not based on money or lifestyle. They were based on the way she had supported him, honored his child, and treated them both with genuine care. Meanwhile, news of the revelation inevitably reached his ex-wife. She heard through mutual acquaintances that he was in a serious relationship, that the woman was wealthy, and that their life together seemed happy. For a moment, she could not find words. She had mocked him, doubted him, and underestimated him. Now, she was confronted with a reality she had never expected. He had moved forward, built stability, and found someone who valued him for who he was. When they met to discuss matters related to their child, she spoke less, listened more. There was no longer room for the mockery she had once wielded like a weapon. She saw him calm, confident, and unshaken by her words. The man she had once belittled had found happiness and partnership, not through seeking revenge or proving a point, but through patience, integrity, and genuine connection. For the single dad, this was a turning point. He realized that life often unfolds in unexpected ways. The future he had feared, filled with loneliness and struggle, had transformed into something richer than he could have imagined. He did not need wealth to feel secure, but he appreciated the new dimension of their lives. More importantly, he had learned that love and respect could exist without material considerations. This woman had chosen him for who he was, and that was a truth more powerful than anything else. As he navigated this new reality, he remained focused on what mattered most, the child's happiness and the integrity of their small family unit. He introduced the woman more fully into their routines, and she accepted the role with grace, never overshadowing him, but supporting and complimenting him. The child adored her, asking questions, sharing experiences, and trusting her without hesitation. Through this experience, he also saw the quiet lessons in humility and perspective. Wealth, he realized, did not define the quality of a relationship. Trust, kindness, patience, and respect did. He felt grateful for the way life had unfolded, for the slow, steady building of a bond that could withstand surprises, revelations, and external judgments. He began to reflect on how far he had come. The man who had once been mocked for being alone and struggling now stood firmly in a life defined by stability, love, and meaningful partnership. It was not a life free of challenges, but it was one built on values that mattered, supported by someone who shared and respected those values. He realized that the journey had not been about proving anyone wrong, but about remaining steadfast, patient, and true to himself. Evenings in their home took on a new rhythm. The child would recount school stories, and they would listen together. The woman would contribute gently, adding warmth and encouragement, never disrupting, but enhancing their shared life. They planned small trips, celebrated milestones, and navigated daily routines with ease and cooperation. The presence of genuine support transformed ordinary days into moments of quiet joy. He also noticed that the past no longer held power over him. The mockery of his ex-wife, the doubts of friends, and the weight of single parenthood no longer defined his identity. He had built a life that reflected his values and priorities. The revelation of wealth did not alter the foundation they had created. She remained the person he respected and trusted. And that mattered more than appearances or expectations. This part of his journey also brought clarity about the meaning of love. It was not about what someone could provide materially or socially. It was about connection, respect, and shared values. He learned that when love was genuine, it could withstand revelations, surprises, and external pressures. The bond they had nurtured over months was resilient, authentic, and deeply meaningful. As the weeks passed, he began to see the broader impact on their lives. The child grew happier, more secure, and more confident. The home environment was filled with trust, laughter, and calm. He realized that the slow, steady presence of someone who cared had transformed not just his emotional world, but the life of the child he loved so deeply. The single dad finally understood that this revelation, instead of creating distance or doubt, had only strengthened their bond. It was proof that patience, trust, and authenticity could create a foundation resilient enough to withstand surprises. It reaffirmed the lessons he had learned through hardship. Life's true value lay not in status or recognition, but in meaningful relationships and genuine care. Part 4 of his story showed that love and respect could endure revelations. That wealth or status did not define the depth of connection, and that patience and integrity could guide life to unexpected and rewarding places. The mockery of the past had been replaced with quiet satisfaction, the challenges of single parenthood with steady support, and the uncertainty of the future with hope and confidence. Life had changed, quietly and profoundly, in ways that words alone could not capture. Life continued with a sense of calm and purpose for the single dad, his child, and the woman who had quietly become a part of their lives. After the revelation of her wealth, nothing about their connection changed. If anything, it became clear to him that the bond they had built over time was genuine, rooted in respect, trust, and shared moments rather than material comfort or social standing. Days flowed naturally, filled with school routines, work, meals, and small adventures. Weekends were spent exploring nearby places, enjoying simple outings like visiting the park, going to the local museum, or having a picnic. She participated in all these activities with care and humility, never flaunting her status, never making anyone feel uncomfortable. The child adored her, and the single dad felt a steady sense of relief, knowing his family had found stability and warmth that he had learned much in the months since their friendship had begun. Patience, resilience, and quiet determination had carried him through lonely nights, financial struggles, and emotional challenges. He had discovered that love could appear in the most unexpected ways, that respect and trust could lay the foundation for a lasting connection, and that true value in a person was measured by their actions, not their wealth, words, or appearances. Marriage had never been part of his immediate plan. He had been focused on providing a safe and nurturing environment for his child, and on proving to himself that he could navigate life with integrity. But over time, the idea of marriage became less about societal expectation and more about celebrating a partnership built on trust, care, and understanding. He realized he wanted to spend his life with someone who had walked beside him quietly, without judgment, without expectation, and with unwavering respect. When he proposed, it was simple and heartfelt. There were no grand gestures, no extravagant displays, just words that came from his experience, his reflection, and his love. She accepted with a smile, as gentle and calm as she had always been, and he felt a sense of quiet triumph, not over anyone, not to prove anything, but because he had arrived at a place of happiness and security on his own terms. The wedding was modest, held in a small hall filled with family, close friends, and those who had supported them along the way. There was laughter, tears of joy, and moments of reflection. The child stood beside him, beaming, feeling the sense of family that had grown slowly, patiently, over the past months. The woman, now his wife, radiated warmth, kindness, and humility. She did not overshadow him. Instead, she complimented him, sharing in their joy and supporting their shared life. Even the ex-wife heard of the wedding. She remained silent, observing from a distance. There was no confrontation, no anger, just an acknowledgement that the man she had once mocked had built a life filled with love, respect, and stability. He had not sought revenge, nor had he attempted to prove her wrong. Instead, he had chosen to live with dignity, patience, and focus on what truly mattered. And in doing so, he had quietly, powerfully won. Life after the wedding was not a fairy tale. Challenges remained. Work required effort. The child had struggles and triumphs at school, and daily responsibilities continued. But the difference now was a shared strength. He and his wife faced challenges together, each supporting the other, each contributing to a home built on care, trust, and mutual respect. The child thrived in this environment, secure in the knowledge that love was consistent, patient, and genuine. The man often reflected on his journey. He thought about the nights when he had sat alone, weary and uncertain, and the small moments that had kept him going, the laughter of his child, the quiet support of friends, and the patient companionship of the woman who had become his wife. Those moments, seemingly ordinary at the time, had created the foundation for a life that was extraordinary in its quiet significance. He remembered the mocking words of his ex-wife, "No one loves you." Those words no longer held power. They had been replaced by the laughter of his child, the warmth of his wife, and the satisfaction of a life lived with integrity and patience. He understood now that validation did not come from proving others wrong, but from living truthfully, acting with care, and building meaningful relationships. His wife continued to play a quiet role in their everyday lives. She did not command attention or demand recognition. She simply existed as a steady presence, sharing in responsibilities, celebrating victories, and offering comfort in moments of difficulty. Her wealth and status were irrelevant to the life they built. It was her respect, patience, and care that mattered most. They also began giving back to their community, quietly supporting local initiatives, helping those in need, and fostering a sense of responsibility in their child. These acts were not for recognition or praise, but were part of a shared understanding that life was richer when generosity and kindness were present. The child grew up witnessing this, learning values of empathy, patience, and integrity that could not be taught in books or classrooms. The man found joy in the simplicity of life. Morning routines, school projects, shared meals, and evening conversations became cherished moments. He had learned to celebrate the ordinary, to find fulfillment in care, connection, and presence. The extraordinary had arrived not through wealth or status, but through relationships built on respect and authenticity. Over time, he realized that the journey had changed him in ways he had never anticipated. He had become more patient, more reflective, and more capable of love that was steady and enduring. He had learned the power of quiet strength, the importance of genuine connection, and the value of choosing relationships based on respect and understanding rather than circumstance. He also noticed the transformation in his child. The child was confident, happy, and secure, shaped by the example of love, patience, and care demonstrated every day. The home was filled with laughter, warmth, and the sense that life, despite its challenges, was meaningful, fulfilling, and guided by values that mattered. In the quiet moments, when he looked at his wife and child, he felt a profound sense of contentment. Life had not been easy, but the struggles, patience, and endurance had led him to a place of stability and happiness. He had discovered that true victory was not about proving others wrong, but about living with integrity, embracing love when it arrived, and creating a home grounded in care and respect. The man often reflected on the contrast between his past and present. The loneliness, the struggles, the mocking words of his ex-wife all had shaped him, but they did not define him. They were part of a story that led to growth, understanding, and quiet triumph. His life now was not defined by wealth, status, or recognition, but by the enduring relationships he had nurtured and the love that had entered his world without pretense or condition. Part 5 of his journey was not about traumatic confrontation, public recognition, or revenge. It was about quiet victory, the kind that comes from living with integrity, building trust, and embracing love when it appears unexpectedly. He had achieved a life richer than he had imagined, filled with stability, happiness, and the shared warmth of family. And in that, he found a profound and enduring sense of fulfillment.